In a stunning announcement that has put the entire continent on high alert, the geopolitical landscape of Europe is facing a potential seismic shift. For months, the West's involvement in the Ukraine conflict has been carefully calibrated to avoid direct military engagement. But that long-held line is now being reconsidered. The United Kingdom has declared that its forces are prepared for deployment to Ukraine. This isn't a vague promise of future support. It's a declaration of operational readiness, suggesting that specific units have been tasked and trained for this very contingency. The move signals a major potential shift in Europe's strategic posture, moving beyond supplying munitions and intelligence to providing a physical security presence. It's a step that fundamentally alters the calculus of the conflict and carries with it a new level of commitment and risk. Crucially, this would not be a unilateral action. The British government has been clear that any such deployment would happen in concert with allies. To that end, the UK is spearheading what is being called a coalition of the willing. This alliance, formed outside the formal structures of NATO, aims to create a flexible and determined group of nations committed to a new phase of Ukrainian security. Its stated goal is to provide Ukraine with the robust security guarantees it needs to not only achieve, but also sustain a lasting peace. The objective is to build a deterrent so formidable that it prevents future aggression. The thinking in London and other European capitals is that if a peace deal with Russia is eventually reached, the security guarantees underpinning it must be real and immediately enforceable, not just words on paper. This new framework goes far beyond the extensive financial and military aid already provided, and moves directly toward the potential placement of boots on the ground. This would be a peacekeeping and deterrence force, not a combat one, but its presence would be an unmistakable red line. It's a step with profound strategic implications, not just for Eastern Europe, but for the global balance of power. UK Defence Secretary John Healey delivered the carefully crafted message during a press conference in London. His words were clear, direct, and aimed at multiple audiences simultaneously: Kiev, Moscow, and Washington. The announcement was framed as a way to support American diplomatic efforts, stating that if President Trump can broker a peace deal, the UK and its allies stand ready to secure it for the long term. That readiness explicitly includes a potential multinational peacekeeping presence inside Ukraine. This is not a sudden development. Behind the scenes, over 200 military planners from more than 38 nations have been meticulously working on this plan for the past 6 months. The countdown has already begun. Complex logistics are being finalized across Europe, pre-positioning equipment and coordinating transport to ensure that if the order is given, the coalition can move swiftly and decisively. However, there is one critical, non-negotiable condition. Any deployment of foreign troops onto Ukrainian soil would require the full, unambiguous consent and official invitation of the Ukrainian government. This is a partnership, not an imposition. At the heart of the proposed coalition of the willing lies a stark and unavoidable truth, one learned through bitter experience. Paper peace isn't enough. For Ukraine, a nation that has endured years of relentless conflict, the promise of a ceasefire or a negotiated treaty, while welcome, offers insufficient protection against future aggression. The core reason for this bold initiative is to build a peace that is not just signed, but secured. History provides a painful lesson. The 1994 Budapest Memorandum, in which Ukraine gave up its nuclear arsenal in exchange for security assurances, failed to prevent the annexation of Crimea in 2014. Similarly, the Minsk agreements, intended to halt the war in Donbass, were consistently violated, proving that agreements with Russia can be tragically fragile. A ceasefire or treaty alone may not protect Ukraine from a similar fate. This pattern of unreliability is a defining feature of the current Russian leadership. What Vladimir Putin says and what he does often diverge dramatically, creating a climate of deep mistrust. Diplomatic assurances have been repeatedly used as a smokescreen for military preparations, making it clear that for peace to hold, deterrence must back diplomacy. Ukraine needs tangible, physical guarantees, a security architecture that can actively prevent an attack, not just condemn one after the fact. That is the problem the coalition of the willing seeks to solve. Without a credible enforcement mechanism, Kyiv could face a renewed invasion the moment Moscow perceives an opportunity. The risk isn't just a possibility. For many in Ukraine and across Europe, it's an expectation. This isn't solely a Ukrainian issue. The risk extends to European stability as a whole. A vulnerable Ukraine creates a permanent point of friction on the continent's eastern edge. The coalition's proposal is therefore grounded in the concept of deterrence by presence. The deployment of Allied troops on Ukrainian soil, even in a non-combat peacekeeping capacity, would fundamentally change Moscow's calculus. An attack on Ukraine would no longer be a bilateral conflict. It would risk immediate confrontation with multiple European nations and potentially the United States. This raises the stakes of aggression from a regional war to a global crisis, a threshold the Kremlin would be far more hesitant to cross. This sentiment is not confined to military strategists. Public opinion across Europe underscores the need for robust deterrence. A recent poll in the United Kingdom, for instance, found that 65% of respondents believe Russia would reignite the war within a decade if a simple peace treaty were signed. This widespread public anxiety reflects a clear understanding of the threat. The coalition's mission is a direct response to this reality, not to fight today's war, but to build a lasting security framework that can prevent the next one. The coalition of the willing marks a new chapter in European security. Led by the United Kingdom, it operates outside NATO structures. Reporting indicates 26 nations are participating, including EU members and key non-EU partners. Its design: act faster than consensus-bound bodies. Healy confirms months of meticulous groundwork. Over 200 military experts from 38+ nations. A 6-month intensive planning sprint. From operations to logistics to rules of engagement. Ready to execute. This is a prepared force, not an ad hoc idea. Financially, London has pledged significant resources. Well over 100 million, around 133 million, for deployment readiness, covering airlift, accommodation, equipment, and ops costs. Post-Brexit, this leadership rebuilds partnerships and credibility. Ukraine sees a reliable partner, consistently first to move. If deployed, the coalition could take on several missions. A peacekeeping role is one idea: lightly armored observers, positioned along ceasefire and demilitarized zones. They would observe, report violations, and de-escalate. But experts note, Europe is not neutral, undermining classic peacekeeping. A more likely option, a combat-ready deterrent force. They would enter in peacetime with a mandate to defend, a capable tripwire that makes aggression costly. Estimates run as high as 150,000 personnel, spread across Ukraine's long eastern and southern frontiers. Europe fields over 1.5 million troops, about 10% for such a mission. An air mission akin to NATO air policing is also possible, monitoring drones, missiles, and aircraft, issuing early warnings, and engaging if rules of engagement permit. Combined ground and air layers would harden Ukraine against future attacks. The greatest obstacle is Russia. Moscow rejects any foreign presence in Ukraine as intervention. It has even demanded a veto over post-war security arrangements. That stance creates a fundamental deadlock. Ukraine's needed guarantees are exactly what Russia seeks to block. A planned Hungary summit was abruptly called off. Reports say Lavrov rejected a frontline freeze proposal. With talks collapsing, security remains hypothetical for now. The coalition stands ready, but with nowhere to go yet. The obstacle is not a hurdle, it's a wall. British public backing remains strong for Ukraine. 80% want Ukraine to win, 69% care deeply about the outcome. Most oppose pressuring Kyiv to cede territory. Yet internal disagreements may limit any deployment. Actions must be synced with NATO to avoid escalation risks. Europe stands at a critical crossroads. After years of brutal conflict, the continent is facing a moment of truth. The old security architecture has crumbled, and the question of how to guarantee Ukraine's long-term sovereignty has become the most pressing challenge of a generation. In response, the UK leads a coalition of the willing, a group of nations ready to commit forces to a potential security mission. Their stated goal is to provide tangible, on-the-ground guarantees for Kyiv. Detailed plans are in place, meticulously drafted by military and intelligence experts. The political will in London appears solid, driven by a belief that inaction is the greater risk. This isn't just rhetoric. A real countdown to deployment has begun. The mission moves beyond sanctions and supplies to a direct presence. The idea is to establish a robust deterrent force, one that would make any future aggression prohibitively costly. But the path is fraught with risks and opposition, both at home and abroad. Not all allies are convinced, with some fearing it's a step too far. The entire operation hinges on a peace deal that remains elusive. This creates a dangerous paradox. The security guarantees are meant to enforce a peace that doesn't yet exist. The central question is one of timing and posture. Stand down and wait for a ceasefire, potentially leaving Ukraine vulnerable, or take a more assertive posture now to shape the outcome. The consequences of this choice will echo for decades. Would troops on the ground truly deter aggression, or would their presence trigger the very wider war they are meant to prevent? Success could secure Ukraine's future, stabilize the region, and set a powerful precedent for international law. But a misstep, a single miscalculation, risks direct clashes with Russian forces. Deploying during active conflict or without Moscow's consent could be seen as a declaration of war. The stakes could not be higher, not just for Ukraine, but for the entire European continent. As the countdown continues, leaders are weighing history, risk, and the potential for a lasting peace against the specter of a continental conflict. Only time will tell which path Europe chooses.